Flythrough Conwy. Today we will be observing and analyzing the features and landforms and processes of the River Conwy. The River Conwy is a river in North Wales. From its source to its discharge in Conwy Bay, it is a little over 27 miles, 43 kilometers long. First, we have to know the different types of transportation, erosion, and the different types of river transport. The three types of river processes, as you can see on the screen, is erosion, transportation, and deposition. Erosion is the gradual destruction or diminution of the riverbed. So it would be breaking down the riverbed and breaking down the river banks as well. Transportation in a river is the movement of sedimentary materials such as rock down the river. Deposition in a river is the deposition of rocks or sedimentary materials, which are usually dropped due to a lack of energy in the river. So first of all, the four types of erosions. As you can see on the screen, these four pictures relate to the four types of erosions. The first one is the corrosion, which is the eraser. It's a turned abrasion. When pebbles grind along the riverbed and in like a sandpapering effect, scratching effect, they produce a grinding effect, grinding out the riverbed. The second one is hydraulic action. This is the sheer power of the water as it smashes against the riverbanks. Air becomes trapped in the cracks of the river banks and bed and causes the rock to break apart. Corrosion, not to be confused with corrosion is when the water dissolves certain types of rocks, for example limestone. And the last one, attrition, is when the rocks that the river is carrying knock against each other, they break apart to become smaller and more rounded. So it's like a banging effect. Then there's the four types of transportations. The first type of transportation is traction, where large heavy pebbles are rolled along the riverbed. This is the most common near the source of the river, as where the load is larger and the power is greater. The next one is saltation. Pebbles are bounced along the riverbed, most common near the source. Suspension. Lighter sediment is suspended, carried within the water, most common near the mouth of the river. And the last one, solution, which you can't really see, but it's the transportation of dissolved chemicals. This varies along the river depending on the presence of soluble rocks, for example, limestone. The source. The source of the river Conwy is called the Llyn Conwy, which is a man-made inland lake. This is where the river begins. Here, you can see tributaries coming out of the Llyn Conwy inland lake. This is the upper course of the river. Generally a smaller volume of water, forming steep-sided V-shaped valleys, forming interlocking spurs. In this area, the river is a shallow channel and has a high bed load. Main features here in the tributaries in this area, the main type of erosion is vertical erosion, abrasion and hydraulic action, and attrition. These types of erosions cause the river to dig deeper into the ground, causing the river walls to collapse and thus forming V-shaped valleys. The upper courses of the river here and near to the confluences normally take place in the mountain. The rivers form its path by cutting through the softest and easily eroded rock, normally found forming a winding path through the mountains. This winding river path takes place through interlocking spurs. As you can see in the picture, the river curves through, as that is the path it was easiest for the river to cut through. Next is the Conwy Falls. This is the Conwy Falls. You can't really see it on Google Earth, but the Conwy Falls is a waterfall formed by the fast-moving water on the tributaries. This is still in the upper course of the river, in V-shaped valleys. As you can see in the two pictures, the formation of a waterfall happens in 5 steps. The first step, the water flows over the hard rock. The soft rock underneath is undercut. The second step, this leaves a layer of hard rock which overhangs the layer of soft rock. The third step, the water flows over the overhang and creates a plunge pool in the soft rock. As the water and the collapsing overhang hits the plunge pool, it will erode by both hydraulic action, the force of the water against the bedrock, and by abrasion, where the material carried by the river acts like sandpaper against the riverbed. The fourth step, eventually the overhang will collapse due to erosion of the soft rock beneath it, The waterfall then retreats upstream. The fifth step, this creates a steep gorge-like valley. So this is called a gorge. The next pin we have is the confluence of a tributary. This is a confluence, where two or more tributaries join forces. The water from the two tributaries merge, and if more towards the upper course of the river, the confluence may cause the river to become even faster. Though if towards the middle or lower courses, a confluence would cause the volume of water to increase dramatically, increasing friction and slowing the discharge of the river down. In this diagram, you can see many tributaries in the mountain range where most rivers begin, joining together in the early upper course of the river. Through the picture, in the end, they merge into a bigger, stronger river. Here you can see a midstream deposition. This occurs when hard rock occurs in the middle of a river. The predicted course, the rivers are forced to take the easier path around the part of hard rock, like how a river delta is formed, creating a so-called island in the middle of the river, a midstream deposition. Over time, sediments are carried and are transported throughout the river and obstructed by the midstream deposition and deposited on the island, making it bigger. This is a meander. As you can see in the picture, a meander is a bend, curve in a river shape. A meander is one of a series of regular curves, bends, turns, or windings in the channel of a river. It is produced by a stream or river swinging from side to side as it flows from across its floodplain or shifts its channel within a valley. The slingshot theorem is what causes meanders to form and over time to expand and become more and more apparent until two meanders join, forming what is called an oxbow lake. The slingshot theory shows how water bounces off one bank, hitting the next with greater force, causing the outside of the bed to form a river cliff, where more erosion is happening with a faster current. In my hand-drawn Nike diagram, showing a side-split view of a meander, you can see that one side is much deeper, which is deemed the outside of the bend. And on the shallower side, you can see the inside of the bend. The complete outside of the bend is called a river cliff, from the deepest point of the river wall to the highest point of the river wall. River cliffs are formed due to great erosion forces over time. Through erosion processes such as hydraulic action, the river digs itself deeper, but the volume of the water remains the same. Therefore, over time, a river cliff overhangs the water or the river. The inside of the bend is where deposition happens, as water is much slower here on the inside of the bend. A slip-off slope is formed. A slip-off slope is a beach-like slope on a riverbank. This is formed by sediments that were previously being transported down the river, but as the river gets slower here, the sediments are deposited or dropped and eventually form slip-off slopes. An oxbow lake is an old part of the river, a curve that was sealed off in a horseshoe-shaped area. Eventually, the water evaporates, attracting wildlife and nature. In this diagram, you can see three simplified stages. A straight river, forming meanders by the slingshot theory, then eventually closing up, forming an oxbow lake, and the river water now moves in a more efficient straight path. Here's another diagram. In this video, you can see a river, forming meanders and eventually forming an oxbow lake. Please remember that this process does not happen this quickly. It happens over hundreds to thousands of years, depending on the river, the location, the volume, velocity of discharge, displacement, elevation, and many other factors. Once the meander joins, the river will no longer follow the curve. That is because it is inefficient to do so, when the river can just go straight. Therefore, the velocity of the river will propel its discharge in a straight path. Over time, the fast-flowing water through the straight path deposits sediments on the riverbanks, completely sealing and blocking off the old curve. This is what is termed an oxbow lake. Here, you can see floodplains. Floodplains are excellent for farmers. Floodplains are areas where river floods flood over the riverbanks and the sediment collects there, forming levees, a collection of deposited material after water is evaporated after successive flooding. This eventually increases protection against flooding as the levees get higher and higher. These levees are really good for farmers as this new material is rich in alluvium, which is a natural plant fertilizer. Alluvium is made of part silt, part clay, and part sand, and is nutrient rich. Makes land fertile and is good for farmers. This helps farmers grow more crops faster and better in terms of quality. After levees are formed, fluvial deposition may occur, where during the lower course of the river there is a loss of energy, and bigger rocks and boulders are dropped, increasing the height of the water in that specific spot. River channels flood over floodplains, where small and large sediments are deposited. Once water evaporates, sediment dries up, a new layer of deposited material is formed, increasing the levee's height. Extra protection for the river. Once the river is able to build up to the levee's height, it will continue to flood over again, repeating the process. Dropped sediments form new lobes of land, though not creating any new land, as that land was already there underneath. Some incentives, such as better farming, not only attracts farmers but attract villagers and city dwellers to settle near the river, as many advantages can be gained from settling near the river. The river could also be used as a source of energy or for cleaning or entertainment or leisure. If you zoom in to Google Earth, you can actually find agricultural and not just agricultural purposes, but you can also find wildlife such as sheep. Currently, the largest floodplain in the world is the Pantanal. This is the lower course of the river. Here, the river is open, gently sloping into floodplains, has flat and wide floodplains, and the river itself is very wide and is a very deep channel. Some features of the lower course of the river are floodplains, levees, and oxbow lakes. Oxbow lakes, which are also in the middle course of the river. The river in the lower course is a very wide river and has a greater push-out forces. The main type of erosion here is lateral erosion, which is erosion through the movement away from the center of the river, so the river gets wider and wider. However, attrition may also occur in the lower course of the river. The only form of transportation that generally occurs in the lower course of the river is solution, which shows the river in its lower course carries a very fine load. So it has a large amount of load, but the load size is very small and very rounded. This course of the river starts where deposition outweighs or is greater than erosion. This is where the river flows into the ocean. This is called the mouth of the river. At this point, the river is at its widest, deepest, and contains the highest carrying capacity of the courses throughout the river. As you can see from the panorama, the River Conwy exits into the Atlantic Ocean through the Conwy Bay, which is now a huge port, and many people have settled on Conwy Bay. Conwy Bay is now a huge trader port, and river mouths like this can open up ports and trading systems, which then in turn can help the country's economy, and the country is able to trade, import, and export more, which in turn helps the country industrialize and develop faster. There are also different types of exits in the ocean. A river can simply flow into the ocean like River Conwy, or a river can form a delta on its exit path to the ocean. A delta is formed where there's hard rock, forcing the water to go around it. Deltas can form many of these paths, creating a delta. So a delta is many pieces of hard rock where water was forced to go around it, so you can see a pattern. There are also different types of deltas which occur in different regions. There's four different major types of deltas. The first one is Bird's Foot Delta. The second one is Estuarine. The third one is Arcuate, and the fourth one is a Lobate Delta. As we went over, you can see the three courses of the river here in this picture, and on the far right you can see the ocean, where the river eventually leads to.